Okay, so I'd really like to welcome everyone to this virtual tutorial. This is, as you may be aware, EPCC is going to be running the computational science and engineering support for the ARCHER2 service. That hasn't started yet, but we thought we'd, especially in the current circumstances, kickstart some of these virtual tutorials, which were a feature of the ARCHER program we're planning to carry on under ARCHER2. And online training seemed like an obvious one to start with. We don't have all the answers. You know, this is one of the good things about the system we're using, Collaborate, here, is that people can collaborate. We can talk to each other. So there's a range of, there's going to be 4 presentations from a range of people giving you our experiences of a range of online training methodologies and experiences we've had. But I really wanted to use this as a forum for getting some discussion going, because clearly, we're in unprecedented. We were always planning to move towards doing a bit more online training under ARCHER2 and as also as part of the university, but we're in unprecedented circumstances at the moment. I'm sure a lot of people are wanting to do this maybe the first time, or there are a lot of people with a lot of experience, probably more experience than us. So we'll hopefully have 4 short presentations, which shouldn't take us more than an hour in total, and then room for discussion. But please ask questions as we go along. We find that chat often works best for questions, but it's up to you. So I will now share my presentation. So this session is being recorded, and as Claire said in the chat, she'll put it up online under YouTube. So there's a format. There are these 4 short talks, which hopefully will get done within an hour. I'm going to give an overview. My name's David Henty. Then Mark Bull is going to give a talk based on his experiences of giving the same course in 2 formats, synchronous and asynchronous. Then Adam Carter is going to give a short talk based on his experiences of actually running an entire online MSc program, the STI program. And then there's a final talk on supercomputing MOOCs, on Supercomputing MOOC, which we did. Now, that was going to be given by Veronica Fillinger. Unfortunately, Veronica's not well at the moment. She is recovering, but she's not been well. So she's given me her slides. So I've given her a picture of her, because you'll be seeing our ugly mugs, but you won't be seeing her face. But she can't present, and so I'm going to be giving her slides because she's not been well. So this is really just, it's very difficult to classify things, but I thought this was a useful way of doing it. This is kind of our ecosystem of EPCC and ARCHER training, and I classified it on these 2 axes. There's face-to-face and online. Clearly, traditional courses like our MSc program and our traditional ARCHER courses are face-to-face, and we'll talk about some fully online courses. But there's also assessment versus credit bearing, and also this axis almost maps onto money, because ARCHER courses are free and MSc programs cost money, at least in the UK system. So that's the diagram I'm going to use. And we're going to cover hopefully a lot of these areas of this graph today. But I'm just going to give a very quick overview, and then we'll dive deeper into it with the future presentations. So first of all, I'm just going to very briefly mention our own MSc program. It is a completely classical format residential taught master's program. We have an MS in high performance computing and high performance computing with data science. That's taken off a lot, particularly in the past couple of years. The data science option is very popular. We have an unprecedented number of 70 students this year. The students do use a virtual learning environment. I'm sure this is true across all universities in the UK. At Edinburgh, we use Learn, Blackboard Learn. And what they get, there are PDF lectures, all the practical material is there, coursework submission, but more recently they get recordings of all lectures. So there's already an online component there. They're not live broadcast, but students can see all the in retrospect, can see all the content online, both as PDFs and as recordings. But more interesting, integrated into Learn, and is Collaborate. That's the system we're using today, Blackboard Collaborate, and that we have used for live delivery on the MSc twice, once during the Beast from the East, which was about 2 years ago, and more recently for the last few lectures of semester because of COVID-19. And actually that worked remarkably well in terms of switching to that format. So even the reason I put this slide up is that even what is formerly a very classical MSc program, campus-based, lecture-based, has getting more and more elements of looking like an online course. Now, we actually run a classical MSc program, which is, well, an MSc program which is credit bearing. Sorry, I've got my slides out of order. But we run it fully online, and we run there's an online MSc which Adam will talk about called DSTI, Data Science, Technology and Innovation, and we're also moving to run our own MSc program in HPC entirely online. But as part of that, EPCC currently runs 3 courses under this program called Data Science, Technology and Innovation. We run Practical Introduction to High Performance Computing, Practical Introduction to Data Science, and Threaded Programming with OpenMP, which my colleague Mark runs, and he'll be able to talk about that. This is entirely online. It's still done via Learn, which is interesting. So it looks the same when you're online, but the lectures are recorded. So that's the big difference. It's a set of recorded lectures, not live broadcast, and it attracts fees as it's a fee-paying program. But the courses we run are, well, the total part of the MSc is 120 credits. The first 2 courses are 20 credits, and the third one, OpenMP, is 10 credits. So we teach quite a substantial amount of content on that course already. They're interested. There are no exams. At least for our courses, it's 100% coursework. And so actually, one of the first things you worry about or think about when you're running an online program is how to do assessment. But actually, the assessment, if you have practical examples, is effectively identical for online and campus-based courses. So that makes that simpler. We are moving to run our entire MSc program online, a whole online master's, the MSc in HPC, first intake back end of this year. And that'll build on our experiences of existing HPC courses under the DSTI. We'll go up to offering a full 120 credits of taught courses, not just the 50 we have in EPCC at the moment. We will be looking at the possibility of some online exams. That's maybe something which people might want to discuss. It's clearly something which is being considered for all undergraduate programs at the moment with the current lockdowns. So that's something which we don't have any. I don't have any personal experience with that, but I am aware of how it's done in general at Edinburgh. And I'm sure other people may have done things like this. You know, in this system, you know, in terms of face-to-face courses, we also have the ARCHER courses, which are typically delivered, you know, face-to-face lecturing and practicals, just like the MSc program. The difference with the ARCHER courses, of course, that they're not assessed, and also they're delivered in typically in intensive courses. It won't be a lecture program over a semester. It will be 2 or 3 days intensive. So, I mean, just to recap very briefly what we've done under ARCHER, it will be similar under ARCHER2. We do about 25 face-to-face courses per year. Typical attendance is about 20 students. I mean, we put all the material online and archive it, but there isn't any assessment, although we do give out certificates of attendance. But what we wanted a while back was how do we deliver this to a wider audience? I mean, because not everyone can travel. People who are in a particular location may not be able to go to a face-to-face sit-down course. Maybe online was a way to do this better. And so what I looked at a couple of years ago was we did an online MPI course. Now, Mark Buller's also run an online OpenMP course, and he'll talk about his experiences doing that. But he used very much the same model, so that's why I want to talk about it here. I heard of a format used by the US Exceed project, which is a kind of a big integration project in the US. It's kind of the PRACE across Europe is kind of the equivalent of Exceed in the US. And what they did there, they've been running it for quite a long time, and I think the technology wasn't as mature when they started doing it. So what they do is they have a presenter and slides and video. They live webcast the lectures, but they have dedicated sites, around 25 around the US. So if you want to go to this course, rather than travel to a central location, you find out which of these 25 locations is closest to you. And they require HD video and high quality audio, and so you attend as a group at each site. So you would go to a room, but there are 25 of them, and you would hear the technical stuff comes from the lecturer, but you can do practical exercises, and the idea is that locals provide basic IT support. Basic IT support being things like, I can't access SSH, I can't get the Wi-Fi going. So we thought that was a useful, interesting thing to do, but we made two changes. Well, first of all, we used Collaborate. This is the system we're using just now. We had a lot of experience of it. We decided to run it over 4 Wednesday afternoons. The US people did it a solid 2 or 3 days. We thought to split it over 4 Wednesday afternoons to allow people time in the intermediate time to do the practicals, so a bit less pressurized. It was the first time we'd done this, but I mean, Mark can talk about the numbers in his course. I got about 50 people at the start and about 25 at the end. We did encourage people to offer up, a room in their building as a site so people could attend en masse, but most people attended individually. And the only thing which maybe didn't work so well, we still is how to get practical support or more practical engagement. People seem less engaged in the practical aspects of the course at distance rather than face to face, but that's something we can take forward. And so that's a classical course online, delivering what we'd previously done as a face-to-face course online. I'm jumping a bit here, and I want to talk about the Archer driving test, which is fully online and a bit credit bearing. So I don't know if people know, but to get at one of we wanted to break this vicious circle that to get onto a machine like Archer, you have to prove you can use it. To get substantial allocation on Archer, you have to prove you can use it. But how can you prove you can use it if you can't get on? So we wanted to have a low barrier to entry mechanism where people could just get on and get a certain amount of time. So they have to sit a test called the driving test. This was actually pioneered by the Dirac project, but ours was a bit lower level than theirs. Theirs was based more on sort of higher level skills. Ours is very much, do you know how to use Archer? Do you know what it is and how it works? And actually over the course of Archer, the Archer service, around about 500 people have passed the test. And the online aspects are interesting. First of all, the lecture, there are learning materials up there, introductory material telling you about Archer, and some of those are lecture recordings. There's also PDFs. But really, I wanted to put it up because the assessment is done online, and we use a system where we have a bank of a large number of multiple choice questions, and what is served up to somebody when they do the test is 5 questions from type A, 5 questions of type B, 5 questions of type C, and then 5 random questions or something like that. And so if you have a big enough bank, you can have a reliable, I think, assessment online where people don't get the same test. People get different tests, but it covers the same kind of areas. And that's something that we've used on Archer. I know other people have used that for fully credit-bearing university level undergraduate and postgraduate courses, but that's why I wanted to put this up here, because it was the assessment which was sort of different for us. Finally, I want to talk about the MOOC, and I'll talk about this. I'll skip over this quite quickly because this is the topic of my final talk. But as part of the PRACE European project, we developed a MOOC, massively open online course on supercomputing, and we used the FutureLearn platform, which is actually an offshoot of the Open University. And it's a free introductory course, but the reason which I wanted to talk about it is it's got a very different flavor from the sort of more academic and technical courses, such as you would do in an MSc or in an HPC training program like for Archer. It's really about awareness raising. It's more like outreach, and therefore we had to think a lot more about how we made things accessible to people, both physically in terms of the material, also in terms of the content. And actually, FutureLearn is a platform which promotes that, which is very, very much geared to that kind of communal learning. And we've run it 5 times. The number of people joining has dropped off a bit, so hopefully it's going to be available in a self-service model in the coming months, but at the moment it's not. So it's an asynchronous model. In some senses, all the stuff is pre-recorded, but it runs for set periods of time. The completion rate is about 10%. We can comment on that in whether that's good or bad in the talk which I'm going to give as the 4th talk in this session. So I didn't want to give too many conclusions, because in an overview, I think first thing is online training is a spectrum. You can classify it in lots of ways. I chose to do it in sort of face-to-face online, credit-bearing, non-credit bearing, but it covers a whole wide range of areas. The technology has matured incredibly in the past 5 years. Where we first did these things virtual tutorials under Archer at the start of the service, it was always done on a wing and a prayer as to whether everything would hold together. Now, people I suppose are sitting at home on Wi-Fi, on commodity laptops, and it all seems to be working fine. We can discuss this later, but what doesn't seem to work, we at one point tried doing joint face-to-face and webcast. So you do a normal face-to-face course and webcast it for a remote audience. That tends to give, in my opinion, both communities a slightly substandard experience. Taking questions over audio is often a problem. It's nice to be able to talk to people, but if one person's audio goes wrong, you can get feedback for everybody. Maybe that's better now, but that was a problem at the start. The community support model for MOOCs, where you have thousands of people doing it, really works very well. And they use chat-based questions and discussions. There isn't any audio in these MOOCs. They work really well. And something I haven't touched on, another thing, if you talk about doing online courses, I think there are two things that people ask immediately. One is, how do you do assessment? The other one is, how do you do hands-on help to somebody when you can't look over their shoulder? Well, all these platforms now, Collaborate being one of them. I'm actually screen sharing at the moment. You can share screens, and I've done that with students where if they have a problem, you can virtually look over their shoulder. So screen sharing for practical support works pretty well as a substitute for face-to-face interaction. So I have managed to keep the time. I don't know if there are any questions on that, but you can ask questions in the chat whenever you want, or we can wait till the end. But that was really just an overview. And I wanted to pass on to Mark Bull, who's going to talk about his experiences of running this technical course, OpenMP, but in two basic different formats. One is in the same format as my MPI course for Archer, live webcast, and also as part of our online MSc programs. So I'll hand over to Mark now.
So yes, as David said, I'm going to talk about two courses which are based on essentially the same material. One covers a little bit more than the other, but there's a lot of common material. One of those is the online OpenMP course in the Archer training program. The other one is threaded programming course in the MSc. Well, it's the STI MSc currently, but will be part of the high performance computing MSc going forward in the future. So the fact that it's OpenMP doesn't really matter that much for this purposes of this discussion, except that to say that it's a practical programming course, so it contains quite a lot of practical programming exercises and material. So for each of those, I'm going to say a little bit about the format that we ran them in, the technology that we used, and some of the lessons learned. So start off with the Archer course. So say like David's MPI course, this was done as 4 live sessions at 1-week intervals. Each live session consisted of 2 one-hour lectures with questions and answer sessions and a half-hour break in between. We gave attendees access to HP resources during and after the course, so we left the accounts open for, I think, about a month or so after the course finished, so people could work on the practical exercises afterwards if they wanted to. We just supplied written instructions for practical exercises in the same way as we do for the face-to-face courses. And we provided support for the practical exercises via a chat page. So not interactively, but just a chat page where people could post questions and we would monitor it and post replies. So in terms of the technology, live lectures like this one using Blackboard Collaborate, posted the slides just as plain PDFs on the course web page. So the URL is there, so the material is still all up if you want to go and have a look and see what we made available online there. The lectures were recorded in Collaborate, and Claire did her usual editing job, but fairly minimally edited on those, uploaded them to our YouTube channel, and those are also posted on the course web page. For the chat page, for the practical support, we just used a basic chat page on Dropbox. So some lessons from this one. So we found that Collaborate generally works very well. It's easy to use for attendees. I hope you're having the same experience today. And yes, in terms of for question and answer sessions, what we normally do is get attendees to type the question into the Collaborate chat box and then read them out before answering them, and that does tend to be easier than trying to cope with attendees' audio and people trying to mute and unmute themselves and having bandwidth difficulties or whatever. We did find that the uptake on the HPC system for the practical work was fairly poor, and not many people seem to log on and do the practical exercises. We're not really sure why, because that's a popular and important part about the face-to-face delivery, and that students tend to enjoy. So perhaps the lack of the interactive element, the fact that you are just doing them on your own and you don't have an instructor there in the room that you can ask questions to and get immediate feedback and advice. So I think, as David said, we do need to think about that, whether we need to do something in terms of more live and interactive support sessions for the practical exercise. And again, the chat page, as it kind of reflects the previous point, really, the chat page wasn't used very much. And as a platform, it's just completely unstructured. It's just, continuous scrolling text, if you like, and what you type in there just goes on the bottom. And so it's not a particularly sophisticated platform for doing this kind of thing. So I want to move on and talk about the MSc course. So in terms of the format, so instead of delivering live lectures, these were pre-recorded lectures. So there's a total of 12 lectures. What I did was rather than release them all at once, I released them in blocks of 4 at around about 3-week intervals. The idea there is to try not to overwhelm students with too much material, but at the same time give them sufficient opportunity to pace themselves through the course, so that they're not waiting for one lecture a week, but that they're not just dumped with the entire material in one go. The practical programming exercise is essentially the same as the ARCHER course. Just provide them with the material and let students be self-paced through that. We used there's a course board for questions and answers and for support with the programming exercises. But in addition to that, I've been doing weekly interactive tutorial sessions. The assessment is via coursework, so students have to write some code and a report about it, but that's essentially absolutely identical to the on-campus version. So in terms of the technology, I just basically sat here at home and recorded the lectures on my laptop. I just did a screen capture of the slides. Didn't try to do talking head video as well. I use an external mic to try and improve the audio quality on the recordings. Something I found helpful, and I know David has as well, is to split the lectures up into, so rather than having a sort of 45-minute or an hour-long lecture, split those up into sections of around 10 to 15 minutes. It certainly helps doing a single take without making mistakes, and having to edit stuff out more feasible, so you have a fair chance of getting through 10 minutes without making without stumbling over yourself too badly, or progressing slides when you didn't mean to, and that kind of thing. And so that reduces the amount of editing you have to do. The videos are hosted on the university's media service, but I've also uploaded them to YouTube, and the main point of that is to be able to auto-generate subtitles. And what I do with the subtitles is download the files, so you can get hold from YouTube. You can download the subtitle files, and you can easily convert them to plain text. There's a website which you can just upload it to, and it'll come back as you can get it back as plain text. So it's basically just stripping all the timing information out, and then you can edit those to produce a transcript. So I feel that's helpful, particularly for students whose maybe English isn't their first language, so that listening to lecture audio, they might struggle to pick up everything. Then you've got a transcript as well to make available for them to read as a backup. So the lecture videos are just embedded in the course web page on Learn, along with the PDF of the slides and also this text transcript. I've just been doing the live online tutorial sessions using Collaborate, and I've used the course chat board on Piazza. So this is a platform, it's a commercial platform for which the university has a subscription to, that you can use for, it's really designed for online learning support. So it's quite structured and it's quite heavily featured. I haven't really explored a lot of the possible features that you can do on there, but the basic idea is that it's more like a bulletin board type structure. So students can post questions, and then the instructor or other students can post answers, and it keeps stuff nicely in threads and so on. And also something quite feature I found quite useful is that you can get it to give you an email notification when a student has posted a question. So you don't have to go and keep looking at, you don't have to remember to go and keep looking at a chat page. You get a notification when posts have happened. Yeah, and in terms of the assessment, that was absolutely identical to the on-campus version. We didn't do anything different for that. In terms of lessons learned, well, there's a huge caveat here in that we had a very small number of students on the first run and had no real problems so far, but some of those problems may not come out until we get larger numbers of students. So I know that Veronica has had to deal with larger numbers of students on her course. I know that one of the things that she's had to do is to run two versions a week of her online support sessions, online tutorial sessions, in order to cope with students being in different time zones. The first time you do this, I found that the whole process of doing lecture recording and editing and doing format conversions and uploading stuff to YouTube and the university media platform and publishing, filling in all the forms that you need to do to be able to publish stuff, and doing the transcript editing. That process is actually quite reasonably time-consuming. Of course, the good thing is that you get to reuse that for subsequent runs of the course, but there's quite a big overhead for the first time round. Students seem to appreciate the online tutorials, and they appreciate the fact that you're able to give prompt responses on the chat platform. They seem to appreciate that as well. Say for coding problems, yes, the online screen sharing is a reasonable solution. Sometimes it's just easier to get students to email you their code, and then you can you can just run it or try to compile it and try and run it and give them some feedback. So sometimes that just turns out to be easier than trying to do it live online. Okay, that's me. That's all I have.
So Mark, can you see the chat? There's quite a lot. Could take some of the questions just now. I don't. So there was the first one, which was direct, was Andrew Brown was asking, about how to convert YouTube transcripts to plain text. That's one of the formats, isn't it? It's actually a human readable
Get the link
format.
to the website. Yes, I'll let Adam start talking, and then I'll find that. And
just to so we're going to pass it over to Adam now, but I think it's important to note that Adam not only is program director for the DSTI online program, he also runs a course, the Practical Introduction to Data Science, which this year has 60 or 70 students, Adam, I think. So Adam has experience of quite, not huge, but good-sized online courses.
Yep. Okay, thank you, David. Can everyone hear me okay, hopefully?
So just while Adam's away, a couple of people did, Adam, ask about, whether to freestyle or script in advance. I think I've found that with the simple technique which Mark talks about, breaking them into sort of 10-minute sections, you can normally do a lecture, without too many, basically in a single take, if you've done it before. Typically these are lectures we've done a lot of time before, and maybe I'm just being self-serving here, but I think some sense you don't want to aim to be too professional. It's a bit of an uncanny valley if you're aiming for really full sort of Hollywood BBC broadcast quality, you will always fall short. So a little bit of informality is not necessarily a bad thing. I think students appreciate that, makes it a bit more personal. So that I found I tend to not script, but that is because there's lectures I've given many times before. So so I kind of have an internal script for them. The question about someone also said that transcripts, yes, I mean, transcript students find incredibly useful because it's actually, I've heard it said, students say when you're revising stuff, if you have a transcript of a lecture, of course, it's trivial to do a quick text search to find if it's what you're looking for, but you can't watch a 1 hour, even 10-15 minute video. So the subtitles, you think the subtitles will probably be only of use to people who are who have hearing problems or aren't native speakers. Actually, all students really appreciate the transcripts, and getting those transcripts for free from the subtitles was a bonus which we hadn't expected. We did find that in the early days, YouTube wasn't, the YouTube automatic translation, automatic subtitling wasn't up to scratch, and you maybe had to do quite a bit of hand editing on the text which came out. But in the past year or so, I think what they use some very sophisticated AI technology. It is quite remarkable how good it is. And someone did a comparison of a paid subtitling service which we actually used under the PRACE project for the MOOC versus the YouTube ones, and there really wasn't any significant difference between them. That's only been true, I believe, in the last year or so. Okay, so Adam's having connection problems. That must have been the issue. So I will just I will jump forward to the next talk while Adam tries to get back online. So you'll see here I am actually sharing, and I'm actually just sharing my entire window here. So screen sharing does work remarkably well.
Adam back, but I'll let you carry on, David. Now you started.
Okay, so this is actually, so Veronica gave a talk at ISC SC, apologies, at Supercomputing into 2018, talking about the experience of our MOOC. So I'm just going to use some of her slides. As I said, unfortunately, Veronica's not available to give this talk. But I think the reason why the MOOCs are interesting is not only a lot of people have been asking questions about supporting students and interactivity and such like. And the MOOCs, especially FutureLearn, which is the one we used, are entirely geared up to promoting that. And I was surprised at how well it worked. So outline. So basically, the difference with a MOOC, the philosophy of MOOC is that they're massively online. There are some statistics here, 81 million learners, a whole bunch of platform providers, including edX. As I said, we use FutureLearn, and lots of courses and such like. The pedagogy, and apparently andragogy is adult learning, is it's much more outreaching to people who wouldn't otherwise get involved. Not really supposed to be any prerequisites. You'll have a range of experience with people on the courses. The online learning is kind of asynchronous and self-paced. That's the FutureLearn model. But it's about social learning. It's built to try and get people to interact. And actually, that does actually work pretty well. The way that it's set up, students do actually interact with each other. But that's mainly due to the numbers. And how do you know if the course is going well? Well, you get basically, you can try and assess engagement. You have metrics on how students have done, and there are tests and quizzes students can do, which you can also get feedback on that. So, I mean, when you're designing a MOOC, this was the biggest challenge for us. It was an introductory course on trying to introduce people who were non-programmers, non-technical people to supercomputing as a concept. We weren't actually able to reuse much of our existing material. So we had to not only did we have to refactor the material, we had to basically pitch it at a different level, make it more conceptual, more interesting. I thought going into this that it would be a bunch of videos. It isn't. FutureLearn in particular is very keen on mixtures of videos, texts, games, quizzes, and there's surprisingly few number of videos that we did in the end. And because the idea, the important thing here is it's to enable and encourage interactions between the learners. That really is the way that the FutureLearn platform is set up. That's the only platform I have real experience of. So this is a typical, these are a couple of MOOC examples. On the right is edX, which I'm not aware of. On the left is an example from FutureLearn. And you'll see that this was a video example, but that's not entirely, sometimes they were just articles. But on FutureLearn, under every item, there is a discussion section. So the discussion section is just a type in, where you type in what you know, just like a chat board, but there's a separate board for each item, for each learning thing, and that works. So they're themed in the sense that the chat board is actually tied to a particular subject. So, you know, our goal in creating this MOOC was for it to be available to anyone interested in supercomputing, both the general public, but also for people, entry-level HPC practitioners, to give them some kind of background in it. You have a very diverse student background, a range of ages, a big range of computer literacy, and multicultural, multilingual. We did it all in English, but it was subtitled, which I think helps the multilingual thing. And the delivery was a mixture of videos, articles, discussions, exercises, quizzes, and tests to encourage engagement, and that did seem to work. The idea there is that you pose a discussion topic. What do you think about this? Have you done something like this in your own life? Can you think of other ways to do it? Students then, or learners as FutureLearn calls them, post ideas, and you monitor it, and then maybe every now and again chip in and suggest something. So it's not a steered discussion, but we have typically on our supercomputing thing, we had about 3 or 4 people nominated, instructors nominated for the run, to kind of look at, and basically their main role was to interact in these chat sessions. I should say, although all the material is available, it's pre-recorded or pre-installed as articles or videos, it's launched in a set 5 weeks. Ours was a 5-week course, so the idea was in week 1 people are doing the first week, 2 people are doing the second week, and that's really there to try and promote this cohort feeling that you're moving through it. That not everyone moves through at the same pace, but largely people are moving through and doing similar things at similar times. There are actually 5 runs. This slide slightly out of date, over 4 years. It's hard to classify engagement, but we had over 5,000 or 6,000 learners. There's people who interact in some meaningful sense with the course. They're distributed over a huge number of countries, but dominated in English speaking, obviously with the UK, USA, and quite a lot of people in India. But there is worldwide coverage for these things, but it was pretty heavily based to where you might expect. There are various metrics you can give, but only about 9% of people completed 90% of the course. And completed means they sort of ticked and took activity. However, people often see that as a real downside. It is 10% of a large number. So if you had told me when we set this up that that there would be hundreds of people completing each run of the course, I would have been delighted. The fact that was 10% of those that started looks like a bad number, but I don't think it's something to be particularly downhearted about. So the lessons learned, I mean, actually demystifying what supercomputing is turned out to be a big part of the course. People have preconceived ideas. Future Learn very much forces you to do different kinds of steps, not too many videos, but the putting it into that format and making it look presentable was a lot of effort. Now, Veronica did most of that. Unfortunately, she's not here, but you then end up with activities which each encourage discussion. Now, the course doesn't run itself. There is input from educators to kind of chip in and keep the conversations online, or make sure that people don't get the wrong idea. For Future Learn, creating a programming-based MOOC would be very challenging. Now, I know people have tried, but Future Learn isn't really the platform, I think, so for very technical content, we have to write code. I don't think that Future Learn would be an ideal platform for that. Just to give a few ideas, this is what a page looks like. This is the splash page, but the one probably most important is there's an activities page. This is week 2. We're starting to talk about how you connect multiple computers together. So there's 4 steps: an article, a discussion, an article, and a quiz. And then an article itself is very short. The videos are maybe no more than 5 minutes, and articles are about 750 words maximum, and with maybe a picture there. So you try and keep things quite short in bite-sized chunks, and every one of these steps has a discussion board underneath. And you do have occasional videos. There's me doing videos myself doing some chessboard example to illustrate a cellular automaton. A colleague knew a bit about video production, so we just used desktop kit, but we did do sort of blue screen videos. That is all very easy to do. Technically possible on just commodity hardware, but you do need to know a bit about what you're doing. So the production quality on these videos was higher than would be true on our other online courses, but there were fewer of them. So that's really where I wanted to stop. I think the reason that the MOOC is interesting is that the whole format of it is designed to promote learners talking to each other. That typically does work very well, but it requires a complete refactoring of the course, and it appears to require large numbers, thousands of people starting it rather than hundreds. When the numbers dropped out, and we're not running it anymore, because when the numbers dropped down to, I think, 600 for the last run, there wasn't that cohort feel. So I think Adam is back online.
I am, yes.
So are you able to?
I'm going to have another stab at this. Yep.
Okay.
Here we go. Okay, so apologies for the issues that I had a moment ago. I think that was due to a recent upgrade to Catalina and not giving Chrome enough permission to share my screen. Anyway, that has now been resolved. So I'll try and get through my slides for you. Okay, so I'm going to give you a very, very brief introduction to the program that I teach, not primarily as an advert, but just so you can see the context of where I'm talking from. And you can see that it is a slightly unusual program anyway. It's not just the fact that it's online. It's a fully online program, but it's taught by 6 schools across all 3 of the colleges. That's the 3 faculties, all the divisions of the University of Edinburgh. So that makes it unusual in itself. It's a broad applied data science program teaching data science skills that can be applied in different fields and contexts. It's part-time intermittent, so students pay for it by the course, so they can build it up over time. And they can build that into, well, they can take single courses standalone as PPD, or they can build it into a PG Cert or a PG Dip or a Masters. We currently have 192 students on the program. So this program we've been running for about 4 or 5 years now, but we're still sort of doing some things for the first time because of the part-time intermittent nature of the program. So what I want, the kind of message that I wanted to put across in this part of the talk is that there's more to a program than the courses that make the program up. And one of the important aspects of that is from the student experience point of view. One thing that's very, well, it's harder to do for an online student is to make them feel part of a cohort. And to give them, one aspect of that is to try to give them a common experience. Because different people in different places are experiencing the program in a different way. Another aspect of this is access to student services. So the kind of things that you kind of expect to get access to when you pay for an online master's program. A couple of other points I'll pick up on. One, just point about the platform, and one thing that's particularly relevant there with relative to the program side, and just make a final comment about design for online at the end. So to talk first about cohort building, the first thing to bear in mind, and it's something that I hadn't really thought about before I started doing this, was that not all students want to feel part of a cohort. One of the attraction of an online program to some students is the fact that they can do it independently, in their own time, fitting it around activities that they're doing, and whether that's a full-time job or whether that is family life or whatever. Some students like the fact that they can just do it on their own terms. And I think that's worth keeping in mind. But of course, many students do want to feel part of a cohort. And even those who maybe when they first started off didn't necessarily see the attraction of that, they find as they go through that they want to learn from how the other students are, what they're doing. They want to see how they are doing relative to other students. They want to build up this kind of feeling of being part of a cohort. So it's a very important aspect that it's important for a course, I suppose, but even more important for a program. So I haven't got a silver bullet for this. As David was saying, we're not claiming to be experts in all of this stuff, but a few ideas that we have used in the program, and one at the bottom that we haven't yet, but we have considered. So we do think that there is value in having events, sessions, so the kind of online interactive things like this, for example, particularly near the start of the program, but also at various stages as you go through, that aren't about the course material. So it gives students a chance to talk about other things and to share their experiences and to learn about learn things from the other students and to build that cohort that cohort feeling that you don't always get a chance to do as you're in the course itself. We use chat rooms, so there's already been some discussion of things like Piazza, but one of the things that works best on my course and other things that we've done in the program is a simple Slack chat room without much structure. It doesn't, it's very obvious on how you use it. You don't have to tell people, write this here, write this there, respond to queries in this kind of way. You just let people talk. And that's quite good for the course support and for giving the technical, some technical things as well, but it's Also very good just for building up relationships with students and allowing them to build up relationships with each other. And they have a nice property that they can move between the asynchronous and the synchronous that David mentioned at the start. For those people who do happen to end up in a chat room at the same time, perhaps at an agreed point in time when people might want to meet up, they can have a chat conversation, which is quite real time and quite back and forth and very interactive. But that material is still all there. So the student who's on the other side of the world or something who has to join at a different time can come back, chip into the conversation, albeit later, but they can still see what's been talked about. They can add to that conversation and so on. So personally, the chat room works very well, both for just course delivery, but also for making students, giving students a chance to talk to each other. Again, as David said, so I've got typically about 50 to 60 students in my class, and that gives enough students to have this critical mass. I think it's much more challenging when you have a small number of students to build up this kind of chatty type atmosphere. But I think with enough interaction, with enough going into the chat room often enough so students really see that you're using it, you can get it to work quite well. Other things that can help with cohort building are group activities. So either part of the courses or separate from the courses. But I think probably most of the group activities that we've done, I don't actually have any in my course, but others on the program, if they can arrange a group who are all in the same time zone and can work on the same activity, it forces people in the group to work together. And that can also build the cohort well. One thing we haven't tried are incentives to support student-led activities, whether that's actually providing them funds to do things themselves if they've got ideas for things that they would like to do with other students, even if they're in a distributed way, or for academic credit, potentially, although you have to handle that very carefully. But that is another thing that we have considered for cohort building. So related to the cohort building thing, I think a common theme that relates to the courses and to the cohort building is this idea of common experience and trying to keep this in mind. You're constantly trying to balance, trying to give people the same experiences so that they can feel part of a cohort, but appreciating that people will have different circumstances. So you've got to take that into account. Whether that's availability for synchronous sessions, things like tutorials and so on, that is affected, of course, by time zones and trying to study around work. So there aren't kind of, well, I'll come on to some approaches at the end, but that's something to keep in mind. So the synchronous sessions are good. I really like them. I think they're a valuable part of the course, but we do have to keep in mind those who can't easily access them. There are other things that on-campus students might have that online students don't. Things like access to research seminars. So that is not something that's necessarily going to be easy to provide, but as more and more things are done with online in mind, particularly in the current climate, there are more opportunities to find out about how seminars are available online so that they can be also available to your online students. Things that students generally won't have the same experience of: software, hardware, and internet bandwidth. They will all be using their own systems, quite likely. So what I tend to do with my course here is to have backups available. So I encourage people to work with their own laptop when they can, because it means that they don't have to deal with internet delays and things like that. They don't have to have a particularly high bandwidth connection. But we tend to also make available a system that is familiar to us, so that's easier for us to support. So if students can't install software, for example, they do at least have the opportunity to log into a remote machine and access things there. So in terms of approaches, I would say don't make assumptions where, if at all possible, particularly as to people's circumstances, their availability, their software, hardware, and bandwidth. Think the things that they have available to them. Where you do want to make requirements, when you do want to have requirements, they should be made very clear at the outset. So if you know that you're going to use some software that isn't compatible with Linux systems, for example, obviously that's not desirable because many people use Linux systems, but if that's just a decision that you have to make, then at least you can make that requirement clear at the outset. Offering alternatives and flexibility is generally how we deal with a lot of the things that we've talked about. So having transcripts for video, which may help people with low bandwidth. It also helps people to search videos to go back to them. Recording synchronous sessions for people who can't be there. Running multiple sessions at different times to cater for people in time zones is something that we sometimes just have to do. A quick comment about platform consistency. So online teaching is newish, but it is fast moving, particularly from a technological point of view, and the platforms are changing every year. And so there is a balance to be met, I think, between trying out new things and maintaining consistency between courses. A lot of course organizers or course developers will want to try out new technologies, and that's great. But one of the things that we do hear a lot from students when course organizers try that is that if something is different in a particular course, particularly if they have to learn a different thing for every course, it makes it much harder, and it's a barrier at the start of each new course before they can actually get onto the learning. So it's a trade-off between using new things and having consistency across the program. And one of the ways to help deal with that, just to make sure that there are very open lines of communication between the different course organizers, even if, in my case, they're scattered across the university, to try to bring them together either in person or virtually to share their best practice and ideas frequently, so that we're aware of how people are teaching on the other courses, and we're aware of how our students are experiencing these other courses. So student experience and student services. Many larger institutions now offer services for online students. And I mentioned the seminars earlier on, but also for these university level services. The best way, I think, of improving the student experience here is to be constantly advocating for these at an institutional level, because online students are different, they're in a minority and they're out of sight. So I think you really have to have people who are thinking about the online students and going along university meetings and saying, what about the online students? Because otherwise they are often overlooked. So I think that is the end of my presentation for just now. So I'm happy to take any questions, and apologies again for any difficulties people might have.
Thanks, Adam. I'm just scrolling through the questions. Sorry, there were a lot there. So someone was asking about, there was a couple of questions about just a general workshop style delivery rather than classic courses, maybe thinking something like software carpentry. We are considering, running carpentry-like courses online, because for in the coming months that's going to be the only option. But and I know that a colleague of mine, Andy Turner, and some other people ran a workshop at Carpentries Connect discussing how you could do this kind of stuff. But that's going to be a learning experience. As I said, it is very difficult to know how to do sort of one-to-one help at scale online, and that's something which we haven't really experienced. When I mean all at the same time. I mean, obviously, Adam's giving one-to-one help to his students on his course, but they're not all trying to contact him at the same time, because they're not all trying to do the exercise at the same time. Someone asked about moderators. Do you need to keep an eye on things? Typically, as I said, actually, we were very worried about this at the start, but I mean, I think something that Mark mentioned is often there's surprisingly less interaction you think. So that would, we've typically not found it a problem keeping up with. With now, obviously, this is the audience today is very engaged, so we are struggling to keep up with the chat. But normally, in a sort of in a more classical sort of lecture type environment, we haven't had problems of just keeping up at the time. So there's a question from Lawrence about online students. Adam, do you want to take that?
So do I think that online students will become less of a minority in the next few years now have matured? So yeah, I definitely think they will become less of a minority. Even if it wasn't for the COVID situation, there was a big push at the university to be moving more things online. I think it is seen as part of the future. For universities like Edinburgh, for example, we are constantly pushed for physical space, and with a desire to grow student numbers for better or worse, I think there is a general pressure to have more online students. So I think, despite well, irrelevant of the COVID situation, and probably made even more important by that, yes, I think there will be a growth in online. I mean, it's one thing that I do that does bother me a bit, in that people have this idea that online equals scalable, and that is not true of itself. It can help you scale around certain things, but there are certain aspects of it, things like feedback for assessments at postgraduate level, that still scale with the number of students, and there is no particular win that you get from being online there necessarily, dealing with large numbers of students. So I think it's something that people who are doing online will have to continue to rail against a bit, the assumption that comes from some people that just because you're online you can deal with massive scale. And again, you can see that, I mean, that highlights the differences between the MOOC and our online master's program. They are run at different scales because there's no way that we could do the same kind of in-depth assessment and feedback that we do on the master's program at the scale of the MOOC. They're two different complementary things.
There's a question about recommending hardware. Actually, I mean, I've run, I don't run it now, but I ran the Practical Introduction to High Performance Computing course online. And as an on-campus course, our courses look a bit unusual because we tend to have a lot of coursework rather than exams, and students log on to a central HPC machine or cluster rather than use their laptops for running examples. Strangely, that when you move online, it's exactly the same, and actually students don't need a very powerful laptop because they just need to be able to log on to a machine where they get all the software, and once they've got SSH or PuTTY or MobaXterm or whatever they use, once they're on, they're fine. So now, if someone's saying here we're looking to use containers, and yes, so you don't even need to have a physical cluster. You could just spin up standard instances. But the important point is that locally they just need a laptop. They need to have decent internet. I don't know if Adam uses a much wider range of sort of technologies on his course with databases and things, and rather than just compiling and running CO Fortran programs. So it may have been a more an issue for him, but surprisingly for us, we didn't find it being much of an issue.
Yeah, so not that different from on the students on campus. In fact, with our online students, we were using sort of virtual machines that people could connect to. We were using an on-university one rather than Amazon or Azure, but it did provide us a way to to know that if we needed to scale that up, we could just spin up another virtual machine and more students could have access to it.
So it's interesting we've got someone here from the Open University, because I mean this is you know, the Open University has been doing this for decades, whereas traditional universities are much more newcomers into it. But I think the point about scalability is very important. That actually, if you think about it, classical lecturing in a lecture theatre is a very scalable thing to do. One person talks for an hour, and you get 200 or 300 hours of student lecture time out of it. But you know, the bits which as the effort which scales per student, as Adam was saying, which is general support, it's marking, it's feedback. All those things are equal amounts of effort online or on campus. It really makes no difference. There's different technologies, but the staff effort is you know, effectively the same. So someone's asking, Colin, does anyone have any containers except already built for teachers from a cloud they can share? I mean, I guess it depends what you want to do. We have looked at providing, we did for a while think about providing an image with standard installations of compilers and things, but we actually found it easier just to give people accounts on our central systems, which are already set up, documented, and have all the software there. So it might be a different situation if you're not, because we run services for external users all the time. Having a few MSc students or distance learners on them as well is not really any support effort. But if you didn't have that to start with, then it would be a different question. And just, I don't want to dominate the call, but someone says, Therese, I recall John Norton running first MOOC at OU with 70,000 students. Yes, so you know, the OU has been running with thousands of people for a long time.
Just to pick up Colin's comment, yeah, I think that would be some direction that we would ultimately like to go into, sort of being able to make our VMs or containers more shareable, but at the moment they are not designed for that purpose. They are very much set up to work with, well, set up very specifically for things we want to do on our courses. So it requires quite a bit of effort, as I'm sure you'll imagine, to make things shareable. So I don't know of many such things that are set up, but I know that the ones that we have were not really designed to be shared, unfortunately. So there was a question about troubleshooting via screen sharing and the scalability of that. The only times that I have used that are in smaller group tutorials with tens at most of students, maybe 10 to 20. So there's the screen sharing from the point of view of the instructor sharing their screen, which has a lot of value in itself. But in terms of getting students to share their screen so that you can look over their shoulder, that is a harder thing to do. And it's one of the shortcomings of some of these tools that it's harder to do in a private way. So I don't think we've really found a very scalable way of doing that.
Yeah, I should say that I found it useful. I mean, especially at the start of the course, when I ran the practical introduction to high performance computing, people would say, I can't connect, you know, I'm getting a timeout, it's not accepting my password. And there I would just arrange a one-on-one session. And, you know, that was so much easier to say, you know, oh, you're typing into the wrong window, you have to click this thing, you know, you've got caps lock on or something. You can see that. But yes, if you're to do that in a sort of synchronous manner when you've got a big classroom is difficult because there are things that you can do breakout rooms and things, but don't know if that works particularly well. I would say that another, just a very, very minor thing, but it has caught me out. You have to be very careful with screen sharing and recording that, you know, if I'm giving a live lecture and I switch to my laptop to do a demo, and I accidentally show my email for a fraction of a second, that really doesn't matter. But if that's recorded, then anyone can go back, and that you have to be really quite careful when you're screen sharing and it's being recorded, that you close everything else down. And you don't know, maybe an email message will pop up. You might get a notification with something we didn't want the student to see. Again, if it's recorded, that makes a huge difference in terms of how much worry there is. And so I would, that is a downside of screen sharing, is that it's very, very easy to give away. You have browser tabs open which have things in them, or again your email, or it's very easy to share stuff you don't want to, which is a problem, which is a big issue if it's being recorded.
Yeah.
So someone's asking what? No.
Yes, David. Sorry, I was about to pick up on that question. What kind of group activities can you hold for an online session? So there are two kinds of group activities again as well. There are those that need to be done synchronously, where everyone is working on them kind of interactively at the same time, and those that you can sort of set people to work on a common problem, and they can work out how to divide up that work and to share that with each other, to produce, for example, one piece of work at the end, or if you're assessing it, you can get them to work on the same problem together, but each to submit their own report on it, for example. So there's that kind of group activity, which I think still builds a cohort, even if they're not doing it sort of at the same time as each other. But other things, for the kind of icebreaker things, that if you can get people synchronously, even in a video conference, doing the same kind of thing, like describing their office space is one that I've heard people use, so that people can like find out whether the rest of the class is working with an external monitor, or whether they have their own office, or whether they're working at the kitchen table with children crawling around their feet. So that just anything that can get people talking to each other are things that can work. But I think it's worth keeping in mind that the group activity doesn't have to be synchronous for it to help build the cohort.
I mean, the ones that I've used have been synchronous, and I used what was Claire, who's the moderator here, who recommended something called Socrative, which is just an online quiz thing. So you ask multiple choice questions, but you do it live, so people anonymously, answer multiple choice questions, and you get, feedback of who got it right and who got it wrong. But that really generates, because people are, they're there watching the questions come up, picking a right or wrong answer. Then that does generate quite a lot of discussion. I've found that's quite useful. I originally did it in a classroom-based context, but it works equally well online. But that is synchronous, and that Mark Dawson's asked the question: did you consider running lectures live, and why did you decide to take the recorded route? The problem with live lectures is, well, online for us at the moment, online means international, so you have time zone issues, and also people are part-time, so they often are fitting this around their regular work. So they might want to study intensively for a few days when they have some holiday, and then not otherwise. So if we have to run our on-campus MSc program in a remote way because of COVID-19, then then you have a choice. You can say you have a dedicated cohort of students who are on the program, and you might decide to do live broadcast as effective, just direct substitute for classroom-based lecturing. But when you have both the combination of both international, worldwide, and part-time students, then really even holding any synchronous activity, you have to double up. So if you hold the tutorial, you have to maybe hold one early in the morning, one in the evening to hit the time zone. So it is a big issue.
Yeah, and I think also, as well as, I think just by doing things that aren't standard lecture shape, it gives you freedom to do other things. Because you're online, you can take advantage of the fact that you don't have to have every lecture running for 50 minutes. And you can have little pieces that people can maybe choose what to watch, depending on what they already know. The quality of a recorded thing can be higher than doing something live, because you can edit it. You can put a lot of production into it if you've got the time to do that. And I think that one of the things that you can, one of the things that makes a good online course is that something has been, you've had multiple takes at it. You've taken out the bad bits. You've made sure that everything is clear and things have been reviewed and things are accessible. And just the recorded lectures that I have seen, when somebody has to, I don't know if you, there's two kinds of live as well. One is recording it live in front of a live audience, and another one is just recording as live. Recording in front of an audience means that you've got different, that you're torn between catering for people in the room and catering for people watching the recording. So that is one kind of trade-off, or one disadvantage of doing it like that, because you've always got to keep these two audiences in mind. Even if you're just recording in front of an empty lecture theatre, you might be able to get good AV that way. But it is just often easier to get good audio quality and good video quality, good demos, good other video content that you can mix into your lecture, rather than just having slides. Having it broken up, for example, with quizzes to give people more sort of lightweight formative feedback. These are things that you can't easily do with just a recorded normal lecture.
I think that, as I said, I mean, our online courses, both for Archer and the online MSc programs, are modified versions of what were existing. I guess I'm not speaking out to Adam, for existing on-campus courses tailored to online. The only experience I have, because someone asked earlier in the chat about the difference between fully online versus sort of recorded lectures or whatever, and the MOOC was interesting for me because Veronica did a lot more work than me, because it was genuinely designed to be online from the start, and I was surprised at how different that made it and how much work it was, even though the actual volume of material wasn't huge. There was quite a lot of work, and a lot of the work is thinking. It's not, there is the recording stuff, but there is the thinking about it. So we've actually, apologies we slightly overran with the presentations. We always wanted to leave a bit of time at the end. This has been very good for chat. Like Adam, I do have another commitment at 4:30. It's great that the interactions got on well beyond the end of the lectures. As I said, we really thought this was just an opportunity to start sharing experiences and such like. We are going to carry on ARCHER2 virtual tutorials mainly in this slot, probably focusing more on what's going to happen in ARCHER2. But I think it is absolutely remarkable that we're able to present to 50-60 people across the UK, people who, all of whom are sitting presumably at home on commodity equipment, and that I know there've been a few issues that we could even think about doing this. If this had been 4 or 5 years ago, there would have been no chance of it working. So I think that is a lesson. But I mean, we really haven't started to I think the COVID experience is going to push us into having to do a lot more online. And so I think sharing experience is really important. It's very easy to try something, it doesn't work, and then someone else says, oh, I did that and it didn't work either. So I think we should maybe think about setting up just that kind of sharing experiences, simple things you can do to make the experience better for students who are also remote and potentially feeling isolated is very important. So I'll shut up now. I'd like to thank everyone for attending. I'd like to thank Adam and Mark for giving their talks, and for Claire for doing such a good job of moderating as always. And she'll be preparing the video, which should be up in a couple of days on the website. So I'd just like to say thanks everyone for attending, and goodbye. And as I say, keep an eye on the Archer website for other things coming up over the coming weeks.